Welcome to On the Middle East, the podcast of the award-winning media service El Monitor, where each week we talk with the decision makers and thought leaders who are making the news and shaping the trends in the Middle East. I'm Andrew Parasolidi, president of El Monitor, and this week we'll be talking about developments in Palestinian politics and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with El Monitor columnist Daoud Kuttab. Daoud is a Palestinian journalist, a media activist, and director general of Community Media Network, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to advancing independent media in the Arab region. He is also a former Ferris Professor of Journalism at Princeton University. There are nearly 3 million Palestinians living in the West Bank, which is administered by the Palestinian Authority and its president Mahmoud Abbas. And there are over 2 million Palestinians living in Gaza, which is ruled by the Islamic resistance movement, known by its Arabic acronym Hamas. Israel's population is nearly 9 million, and approximately 2 million of those are Arab citizens. The more things change, it seems, the more they stay the same. Last year, the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco all committed to normalizing ties with Israel, and Sudan seems on track to do the same, joining Jordan and Egypt as Arab states with diplomatic relations with Israel. And for the first time, the United Arab List, an Israeli political party, not only joined a new Israeli coalition government that was formed in June, it was the first time an Arab party had ever done so, and its leader, Mansour Abbas, was a power broker in the government formation process. Meanwhile, the fault lines between Israel and the Palestinians are familiar and remain the same as they have ever been. Israeli settlements, the status of Jerusalem, prisoners, and more. And this is all in addition to the frustrations of a young generation of Palestinians, not only fed up with the Israeli occupation, but also with their own leadership. I can think of no one better to discuss all of this with than my friend and colleague, Daoud Kuttab. And that conversation begins now. Daoud, welcome to On the Middle East.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Daoud, El Monitor is reporting today, as we record this podcast, that Israel is sending a delegation to the United States that in part is going to explain to the administration, perhaps others, the rationale behind the designation of certain Palestinian NGOs as terrorist groups. Israel is saying that they are linked to the PFLP, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And this has stirred a great deal of controversy in the region, questions within the Biden administration, and some reactions on Capitol Hill. How do you see that designation, and how is it being read among Palestinians?
Well, this is kind of a usual thing that the Israelis do, except the world is not as trusting of what Israel does as it usually does. The idea of conflating and labeling anything that is critical of Israel to be either a security threat or connected to terrorism or anti-Semitic, God forbid, then but these labels are losing their value. They are being devalued by the exaggerated use and by the proven falsehood of many of these attacks and accusations. So I think what happened here is that the Israeli defense minister, out of the blue, called an organization like Al-Haq, which has been working for 30 years, is the Palestinian chapter of the International Commission of Jurists, a well-respected organization. All of a sudden, they say this is a terrorist organization or diverts money to terrorists or something to that effect. And to be honest, few people believe in the terminology, unless you have such a wide definition of terrorism that includes anybody who has political thoughts or political ideas and ideologies, or used to 30 years ago belong to one party or another, to be a terrorist. And this is the problem that we have with Israel. Everything that is done by almost any Palestinian is terrorism. I mean, not a single Palestinian journalist, for example, is labeled as a professional journalist. We're all Palestinians, and in a way, one way or another, one form of terrorist or another. And so this again hit the wall at exactly the wrong time, when a lot of people in the world are questioning Israeli claims. And it was done in such a flimsy way. Not even the own government knew about it. Not the US government knew about it. They did not really, until this moment, produce any factual evidence to prove this wide-ranging claim of women's committees, agricultural committees, children's defense organizations, well-known, respected human rights organizations. Of course, many Israelis, most Palestinians, many international Human Rights Watch and Amnesty issued a joint statement, and everybody's saying, wait a minute, what's going on? We know these people, and they are not terrorists. And how, we just make a claim verbally and you want everybody to believe you. And I think the biggest worry, of course, is Washington. And so the Israelis have dispatched this team to try to provide the secret, undeclared information, so classified they can't even tell their own people about it, to prove that all these organizations are such terrorists that, one cannot allow to continue. It's just mind-boggling.
Tell us about the PFLP, because one of the accusations is that they are linked, or somehow the funding is connected to that group. Some of our listeners may not be familiar with the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Tell us about them and how that fits into this accusation.
Well, first, the PFLP is a secular organization. It has nothing to do with the Islamists. It has nothing to do with any of the radical organizations that have been carrying out violent attacks against Israel. They are not involved in any military attacks. They don't have military cells. They are a radical, if you will, politically left-wing organization in the Palestinian organization called the PLO. They are a PLO organization which Israel signed a peace kind of a memorandum of understanding with. So the fact is that the PFLP is one of the organizations make up the PLO, which Itzhak Rabin has signed an agreement with the PLO chairman. So, all of a sudden these are, terrorist organizations. Come on, and now, again, it is possible that some of the leaders of some of these organizations 70 years ago, 30 years ago, used to belong to the PFLP, maybe were imprisoned with charges of being a PFLP member or supporter. But so what? Being a supporter of a left-wing Palestinian organization does not mean you're a terrorist. And this is the big problem we have with Israel, is for them, any Palestinian who's opposed to the state of Israel and its occupation is somewhat labeled a terrorist. And that definition, I hope, will not pass in Washington.
Daoud, there was, I think, an expectation that when the new government came into power in Israel, replacing Prime Minister Netanyahu, who was the longest serving Israeli prime minister, when the Bennett-Lapid coalition took office in June, that relations would be better around the Palestinian issue. But since then, Israel has allowed more Palestinian workers into Israel, I guess on the positive side. There's been some reconstruction assistance to Gaza since the Israel-Hamas war back in May. But there's also further settlement activity around the Jerusalem airport and other areas. Give us a sense of what's happening on the ground and in terms of the political relationship between the authority and this new Israeli government. Is it considered a disappointment? Is it more of the same? How do you see it?
Well, it's actually a refreshing change from the Netanyahu and even the Peres, and even sometimes the Rabin and others. This government of Israel is very honest, and in a bad way, but they're very honest. They're saying, we don't want to talk to the Palestinians. We don't accept the Palestinian state. We're against the two-state solution, and that's that. Okay, we don't mind having them have a little bit of economic improvements here and there, but politically, they are totally honest in their, they don't play games, they don't lie, they don't do politics, they're just saying, we're against it. Now, you could look at that as a refreshing change, but you also could look at that as, my God, for years we were told it was the Palestinians who never miss an opportunity. Now it's the Israelis who are saying no to negotiations, no to talks, and they're boasting about it. So on the political level, there is nothing moving at all. A few far left members of Meretz who are part of the coalition government visited Mahmoud Abbas, but nothing really of substance has happened there. Now, on the ground, this is a government headed by Yamina head, the head of the right-wing guy who used to be the head of Yesha, the Council of Jewish Settlements, and he's gung-ho on building more Jewish settlements, and apparently that's what he's going to do in defiance of a UN resolution that Biden and Obama had not vetoed in the late days of the Obama second administration. So UN Resolution Security Council 2334 says no settlements should be built. It's illegal. It's against international law. But this government doesn't really care. And it seems that they are not able to be convinced by the Americans to care. Now, they're trying to throw in, okay, we'll allow a few Palestinian homes to be built in the Palestinian areas, as if that's a kind of a gift to the Palestinians, although Palestinians have a right to build without that being offered as a kind of a gift or whatever. But that's how they're trying to play this one. In general, the big issue is Jerusalem was and continues to be the big point of friction. We have lots of problems in Al-Aqsa Mosque. Today we have problems in a cemetery just outside of the wall called the Yusufiya Cemetery, where the Israelis are digging up the bones of Palestinian Muslims and even Jordanian soldiers to create some kind of a natural park of some kind. It's very shameful. And there are videos of family members hugging the graves of their relatives, and the Israelis taking them away and then uprooting the graves and whatever happens with the bones. It's very shameful that all these things are happening. But on the ground, the big issue is the settlement expansion and the Jerusalem conflict.
Is Hamas gaining in popularity as the settlement issues pick up? And do you see that Hamas is expanding its influence in the West Bank?
Hamas is going through a very interesting kind of change in public opinion. They are more popular. And when you ask a question, or do you like Hamas? And you get a high percentage. Then you ask the same question, would you vote for Hamas? And you get a smaller percentage. They still do very well, but they don't do as well when you ask them the question if you would vote for them or not. And I think that reflects a kind of emotional support for Hamas, for being tough enough, brave enough to stand up to the heavy-handed Israeli machine. But then, the practical decisions come into your focus when you ask them, would you vote for Hamas? Fewer people would support it. And I think that's a kind of a reflection on the situation of Palestinians. On the one hand, they want groups to stand up to the Israelis, but on the other hand, they don't want to have those groups be in charge and totally ruin life as they see it. So, but yes, I would say Hamas has gained somewhat in popularity. I think it's starting to erode because they've not really been able to succeed since then of doing anything of importance. They have not yet concluded the prisoner exchange. The Israelis continue every now and then to bomb Gaza. So there hasn't been any real gains that have been made. But yes, they are popular, including in the West Bank.
Now, Hamas's rise in popularity, as you describe it, and for the reasons you describe, comes at the expense, of course, of the Palestinian Authority, which this year has seemed to go through a very challenging time. There was the postponement of the general elections in the spring, the killing of government critic Nizar Banat, general attacks on press and other freedoms. And then at the UN, President Mahmoud Abbas's virtual address, he spoke there on September 24th, he said he was giving Israel 1 year to withdraw from the Palestinian territories it occupied in 1967. So pull this all together for us. You've painted a picture for us today and in your many columns and writings about the challenges of legitimacy that the authority is facing. And boy, did it take a hit with the elections not being held. Where does this all stand, and what is Abbas doing at this point by making that statement at the UN, and how would he back it up?
Yes, I would definitely agree with you that Abbas got a big hit. Fatah, his movement, got a smaller hit because despite all of what Abbas did, some of their supporters, especially in the north, in Jenin area, are quite active in anti-Israeli and anti-settlement protests. So Abbas personally, his favorability ratio has gone down a lot. And what he did and his security people did was not very good. Now, as you said, there comes the UN statement, and it caught many people off guard, and its specificity and its courage in the way that he kind of pulled everything together into a single, I don't know, half an hour or whatever statement that, put the Israelis at least theoretically on the rope of having to respond. Now, I don't know. I don't think it's been reported a lot, but in the last few days, there has been a flurry of meetings that Abbas has been having with his own Fatah, with the PLO Executive Committee. They're starting to talk to other factions in the PLO that have been opposed to them, and there is apparently a preparation for talks with Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And they're talking about a meeting of the Palestine Central Council by the year end to really come up with the roadmap of what Abbas said. Everybody agrees generally with what he said, but as you said, it has no teeth. And unless there are some strong positions, nobody will take his statement seriously. And I think that's what he and his group are trying to say. You cannot make a statement unless you can back it up with popular struggle, popular protest, boycotts, whatever. But it's worth nothing if you don't do that. And I think he understands that he has to do that. Now, I think the 1 year ultimatum is connected to his own lifelong career. He wants to end his career on a high note. He wants to, I think, nobody's, I have no information on this, but my analysis is that he's saying, I'm giving political, diplomatic possibilities 1 more year. After that, I will resign and let whoever takes over, take over. That's my personal analysis. And I think he's given everybody a year to kind of come up with the serious plan. And at the same time, he's giving his own team or his own group a year to kind of prepare themselves for the succession of Mahmoud Abbas.
Why didn't he follow through with elections as an option if he's thinking through succession? It seemed at the time, as I recall, that there was a concern that he and his faction within Fatah may have suffered a significant loss if the elections went ahead on schedule.
The last time we were in this situation was in January 2006, and he was in favor of elections, and many of his advisors told him you would lose badly. He didn't listen to them, and they lost badly. At this time, again, he asked his top advisors, how would we do in elections? And they told him you'll lose. And not that the PLO would lose or that the secular national movement would lose, but that his own Fatah would not garner 51% of the votes. And he basically said, I'm not going to risk another election where our group would lose. And so he took the unpopular decision of postponing the elections. Now, I don't think that having the elections would have given him any kind of a heads up or any movement ahead on the issue of succession. I think what he wants to do is end his career on a political high note and probably on a diplomatic one rather than anything else. He's always been against any violence or any use of arms or whatever, and he will not end his political life changing his position. So elections is something that, under occupation is not a huge change, as some people told him. He needs actually to have elections within his own Fatah movement. That's where really you need elections. And I think once the US and others were told him, we will not complain too much if you postpone the elections, and it was a very easy decision from his point of view. Now, as you said, things didn't turn out very well, because after that, there was the death of one of his critics, and people who protested that death were put down very violently. And so add that all up together, it has ruined a lot of his standing with many people. He still has strong standing, and his movement has strong standing, but he himself has lost a lot. And this 1 year ultimatum, maybe his kind of last hurrah before stepping out of the political limelight.
How is he managing the situation, I should say, relations with the Arab Gulf states post-Abraham Accords? Now, it seems that Israel, with the backing of the U.S., is picking up the pace on its engagement with the UAE, for example. And earlier this month, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan discussed normalization with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Now, that doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon, but this overall trend of Israeli engagement, they're participating in the Dubai Expo, et cetera, and really pushing ahead with these agreements. How has that affected the PA's engagement with Arab states, on which they've relied historically for a great deal of financial and political support?
Yeah, I think the Palestinian government's relations, and including Abbas with the Gulf states, has had a hit even before the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords basically added to the demise of the relationship. Some of it has to do with the status of Mohammed Dahlan. Some of it has to do with the direction that the Palestinians were taking during the Trump administration. But overall, I would say if you add the Trump administration, Dahlan, and the Abrahamic Accords, it's one big disaster. And as a result, there hasn't been much movement in terms of financial support to the Palestinian government. And, they're still supporting the UNRWA, and there's still some projects in Jerusalem and other places through Dahlan's committees and charities. But in general, the Gulf, with the exception maybe of Qatar, has not had very good relations with Mahmoud Abbas and vice versa. And yes, the normalization was a big blow. Initially, Palestinians were attacking the Emirates, but Mahmoud Abbas himself tried to water down the criticism, because not only because of needing the Gulf countries, but also because there is a huge amount of Palestinian workers and in general business people working in the Gulf area, and Palestinians cannot afford losing the money that they send back home. And so in general, the whole thing was watered down. Also Jordan, Egypt, and the Palestinian government have normal relations with Israel. I mean, they have actually signed agreements with Israel. So, they cannot be too holier than thou with those countries, except in the fact that they violated a sacred agreement to not to normalize until Israel withdraws the Arab peace plan. So, except for that, which obviously is a very big exception, it was a very difficult position. And I think generally Palestine and also Jordan and Egypt kind of turned a blind eye to the Abrahamic Accords, believing that eventually it will not really take root. And in fact, it hasn't taken root with the public. I mean, Dubai and the Emirates, are largely immigrant business communities. They're not a genuine, they don't have a huge number of nationals that live in those countries. And Yeah, but it was, I mean, Sudan and Morocco was much bigger problem. And in both countries, in Sudan, we're seeing today all kinds of things happening. And in Morocco, those who supported normalization lost big in the last election. So in general, Palestinians don't feel that it went as bad as it could have gone, but they were not happy with it, that they had to keep quiet.
How has the involvement of the United Arab List, led by Mansour Abbas, participating in the Israeli government for the first time, how has that impacted the Palestinian issue in politics, if you think it has at all?
It really hasn't, to be honest with you, Andrew. I don't feel that there has been any impact, for the following reason: that Mansour Abbas agreement with Bennett and with other coalition partners stipulated that they will not take a position on the Palestinian issues. That was a stipulation. So they actually are committed not to take a position. Also, they were committed not to do anything. I mean, they're not going to seek the two-state solution. So basically, Bennett succeeded in neutralizing them on this issue, while agreeing on big support for the budgets and for fighting the internal violence in Arab towns inside of Israel and so on. But on the Palestinian issue, their hands are handcuffed.
What are your expectations for the next year? What are the kind of fault lines and trend lines that you're watching?
We normally do that in the eve of the year, but I'll try my best now, Andrew. I think that the big decision now, and the big issue now, is in Israel, the passing of the budget. It's due to happen in the next 2 weeks. And some say that a lot of the decisions of the Israeli government these days are connected to that because of Netanyahu's attempt to try to defeat the budget, the vote. Once the budget issue is over, I think we will be in the coming year seeing more Palestinian protests, as also the one-year ultimatum of Abbas starts getting closer. And also, I expect that 2022 will be the year where we'll see some kind of a general direction as to who will succeed Mahmoud Abbas as the head of the Palestinian leadership. These are the issues that I'm looking at. Succession issue is going to become much bigger. And Israel, I think, will have to come to terms with the fact that not everybody is agreeing with them, but basically most countries, including Washington, are basically holding back now so that they can get their budget passed, and that slim majority that Bennett has will not be a cause for a return to Netanyahu.
Daoud, thank you for taking the time today. I appreciate your analysis and all your many contributions to Al Monitor over the years.
Ahlan wa sahlan. Thank you so much, Andrew. Take care.
We will return after this break.
What in the hell's going on?
You ever look at the news and wonder what the hell is going on?
Hi, I'm Danielle Pletka.
And I'm Mark Thiessen.
We often think that when we look at the news these days. That's why we started our podcast called
What the Hell is Going On? We bring you amazing interviews with experts who know exactly what the hell is going on.
Nobel Prize-winning researchers,
Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists,
and even presidents.
Danny and I will break it all down for you. I'll tell you how Danny could be more interesting.
And I'll explain to you why Mark is wrong.
So tune in so we can all find out what the hell is going on.
Hello, I'm Gilles Kepel, professor at Sciences Po and Normal Sup in Paris, and author of a number of books and articles on the Middle East. The Middle East remains one of the most vital and fascinating regions in the world. It is rich in complexity and ideas, but for many in the West, it remains a puzzle with many missing pieces. Through my new podcast, Reading the Middle East, on the award-winning media service Al Monitor, we will take a deep dive into the trends in the region with the authors and thought leaders who are shaping how we think about the Middle East. To begin my podcast, I speak with my friend and one of the most renowned novelists of the region, Egyptian writer Ala El-Aswani, about his latest book, The Republic of False Truths, that chronicles the run-up to Egypt's 2011 revolution and its aftermath. Reading the Middle East will be a fantastic addition to Al-Monitor's outstanding podcast lineup, including On the Middle East with Andrew Paraziliti and Amber Zaman, and On Israel with Ben Caspit. You can subscribe to all 3 Al-Monitor podcasts on your favorite listening platforms. We look forward to your joining our conversation.
Thanks to our guest, Daoud Kuttab, our production team of Phil Calabro of Al-Monitor and Beowulf Rockland of Two Square Media Productions. And thanks to all of you for listening. We will be back next week, and if you haven't done so, please sign up for all of our Al-Monitor podcasts. Reading the Middle East with Gilles Capel, On Israel with Ben Caspit, and On the Middle East, hosted by Amber and Zaman and me, all at your favorite podcast platform.